She believed the children she had rescued had disappeared from her life forever, until 25 years later, in a silent courtroom, a word from the child she had raised changed everything. Come with me, because this story will shatter your heart and rebuild it at the same time. On the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia, stood an old house made of whitewashed planks, with peeling paint, with a porch that creaked every time the breeze blew. For most people, it was just another old building. But for Mrs. Beatrice Henderson, a 47-year-old widow, it was all that remained after her husband Thomas died of cancer. Beatrice lived alone, working long hours as a cook at the Magnolia Cafe, struggling to make ends meet. Yet she was the kind of woman who gave what little she had, leaving stale bread and lukewarm coffee for veterans who passed by. One stormy November morning, as she stepped onto her porch, she noticed a pile near the back fence. 3 skinny, pale boys, soaked to the bone, huddled under a tattered blanket. They didn't speak, just stared with empty eyes. Beatrice asked no questions. She simply said, "When did you last eat, children?" That was the moment the silent house on Magnolia Street was never silent again. The boys were brothers, bound by blood and scars. Marcus, about 12, stood tall for his age, a chipped tooth showing whenever he clenched his jaw. He was fierce, protective. Thomas, 9, remained silent, his sharp eyes scanning the room like someone who constantly expected danger. Benjamin, the youngest, 6, still sucked his thumb and didn't speak a word for months. Beatrice gave them her own bedroom and moved herself into the small storage room in the back. She stretched broth with water, patched shoes with pieces found in thrift stores, and prayed the gas bill wouldn't exceed her salary. When neighbors whispered, "Why does she keep those poor white boys?" Beatrice held her head high and replied, "Children don't choose their color, they just need someone to love them." From that day on, the Henderson house lived again with the chaos of boys. Life wasn't easy. Marcus came home bloodied after hitting a man who had insulted Beatrice outside the grocery store. Beatrice didn't yell. She gently bandaged his bruised knuckles and whispered, "Hate is loud, son, but love screams louder." Thomas was caught stealing once. Beatrice didn't punish him with anger. She sat him down, talked to him about dignity, and taught him that surviving shouldn't mean being ashamed. And Benjamin, who hadn't spoken for so long, gradually found his voice. He began humming with Beatrice, and later stood beside her at church, reciting verses in a trembling voice. He was healing. Not perfectly, not quickly, but with love. When the boys reached adolescence, Beatrice's health began to decline. Diabetes and arthritis slowed her down, but she refused to complain. The boys, now stronger, took small jobs, mowing lawns, stocking shelves, anything to help with the bills. Then, one by one, life took them away. Marcus enlisted in the Navy, still restless and hungry for purpose. Thomas left for Atlanta, seeking work and a better life. And Benjamin, the quiet, thoughtful Benjamin, got a scholarship to the University of Georgia in Athens, the first in their family, as Beatrice loved to brag. The morning he left, Beatrice made him sandwiches, hugged him tight, and whispered, "No matter where you go in this world, Benjamin Henderson, you're mine, and I'll love you forever." The years passed, and Beatrice found herself walking slower, her joints stiff with age and illness. The house that had once echoed with laughter now seemed hollow, filled only with memories. One gray afternoon, Beatrice put on her shawl and took her usual path to the local pharmacy to get her medications. The street smelled of rain and gasoline, and Beatrice clutched her small purse tightly. Just as she reached the pharmacy steps, chaos erupted. A well-known real estate developer staggered, his face pale, before collapsing on the sidewalk. People screamed for help while Beatrice stood frozen, stunned. Paramedics rushed in, working frantically, but within minutes the man was declared dead. Later, tests revealed fentanyl in his system. Surveillance cameras only showed Beatrice nearby during those crucial minutes, and when a box of pills disappeared from the pharmacy shelves, suspicion fell on her like a dark cloud. No motive, no fingerprints, nothing to link her to the crime except circumstances. Yet for the police the story was too obvious. A poor black woman, a rich white man dead, and a narrative that fit perfectly with their expectations. So, without any real evidence, Beatrice Henderson was arrested. The Chatham County Courthouse seemed colder than any cell. Beatrice sat at the defense table, her hands trembling, her lawyer barely speaking for her. The prosecutor called her a thief, a liar, a woman with nothing to lose. The jury agreed. No sons in sight, no family to testify for her. When the guilty verdict was read, Beatrice bowed her head and prayed, "Lord, if my time has come, watch over my boys." The sentence came next. The judge's gavel was ready to strike. Life in prison, maybe death. Before the gavel could fall, a voice rose, full of urgency, seeming to shake the very wood of the courtroom. "Your Honor, if I may." Heads turned. The bailiff stiffened. From the back of the room a tall man in a gray suit stepped forward. His shoulders were straight, his beard neat. But it was his eyes that drew all attention, eyes full of fury and pain, eyes that carried years of silent gratitude. "My name is Benjamin Henderson," he said, his voice carrying. "She didn't do this." "She couldn't." The judge raised an eyebrow, visibly annoyed by the interruption. "And who are you to speak here?" Benjamin swallowed, his voice wavering before strengthening. "I'm the boy she saved from death in an alley, the boy she taught to read by candlelight when no one else cared. I'm the son she didn't birth, but raised with everything she had left. And I won't let her be condemned for something she never did." Gasps ran through the room, whispers rising. The judge leaned forward. Benjamin pulled a USB drive from his pocket with trembling hands. "And I have proof." He handed it to the bailiff. Moments later, the screen lit up, showing clearer images than the jury had seen. The room held its breath as the truth was revealed. It wasn't Beatrice, but the pharmacist's nephew, slipping something into the victim's drink long before Beatrice appeared on screen. The room exclaimed, this time louder, disbelief and shock piercing the heavy silence. The judge suspended the hearing, and the room exploded in murmurs. Jurors exchanged worried glances, the prosecutor shuffled his papers with a shaking hand, and spectators whispered. Within minutes, the truth unfolded. Beatrice was innocent, the evidence undeniable. The gavel struck again, this time not to condemn but to free. When Benjamin returned to the defense table, he moved quickly, as if years of distance had collapsed in a single instant. He ran to her, fell to his knees before the frail woman who had given him everything, and held her trembling hands as if clinging to the only truth that had ever mattered. "You didn't think I'd forget you, Mama, did you?" he whispered, his voice broken by love and relief. For the first time since the trial began, Beatrice's mask broke. Tears flowed down her cheeks, her voice burst into sobs of gratitude and disbelief, while the entire room rose in thunderous applause around them. A few days later, her porch came alive again. Neighbors slowed their cars to see the old Henderson house, once silent, now vibrant with voices and laughter. For the first time in years, Beatrice's steps seemed lighter, seeing the familiar faces of her boys return one by one. Marcus arrived straight from deployment, still in Marine uniform, his embrace strong enough to lift her off the ground. Years of combat had hardened him, but in her arms he became her son again. Thomas drove from Atlanta, bringing a bouquet of flowers from a gas station, hugging her like he was 9 again and whispering apologies for the years of absence. And Benjamin never left her side, watching over her, determined to make up for every mile and every lost moment. They sat at the same old kitchen table where countless meals had been shared, filled with the smell of cornbread and iced tea. Beatrice stirred pots on the stove while her sons playfully argued about who would do the dishes, the clatter of plates mixing with laughter that seemed to erase years of pain. Later that night, when the house quieted and only crickets sang outside, Beatrice stood beside Benjamin on the porch. The night air was cool, stars scattered above them. She leaned on the railing, her voice soft but sure when she whispered, "You saved my life, son." Benjamin turned to her, eyes moist under the moon, and shook his head. "No, Mama. You gave me mine. I just returned a little." Love doesn't always come from blood ties or shared skin. Sometimes it comes from broken children and the borrowed faith of a woman. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it comes back to you in the form of a courtroom miracle. If you were in Benjamin's place, would you have entered that courtroom to defend the woman who raised you? And if you were Beatrice, what would those words mean to you after all these years? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to know what you would have done. If you love this story, hit like and subscribe to Stories That Matter for more moving tales.